Hello, welcome in. It's the PHNX Cardinals Podcast, your premier Arizona Cardinal podcast. Like and subscribe. Leave us a 5-star wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Johnny Venerable. He is Bo Brock. We are continuing our offseason roundtable with some of the best who cover this franchise today. We are fortunate to be joined by managing editor at USA Today's Cards Wire. You know him, Jess Root. Jess, thanks so much for jumping on with us, my guy.
It's a pleasure. Glad to be with you guys.
Yeah, Johnny, we're excited. We're doing this roundtable series. We caught up with some old friends, Alex Clancy, Blake Murphy, a couple weeks ago, and then the guy who churns out probably the most Cardinals content on the internet.
Not probably, definitely.
Yeah, no doubt about it. No doubt about it. I mean, every day you're seeing multiple articles from Jess covering all things Cards, and he's been doing it for a long time. How long have you been covering the Cards, Jess?
I think it was 2011, March of 2011 is when I got my start with Revenge of the Birds over at SB Nation. And then I've been with USA Today doing the Cards Wire since in fact, this month, 7 years ago.
Wow, that's incredible. And we're obviously buddies with the Revenge of the Birds site manager, Seth Cox, who does fantastic work. Great guy. It's a community, right? And
Yeah.
to be honest with you, when I joined Twitter, I think it was like my junior year of college, like it was in 2009. I feel like that was like the same year you had got started on Twitter and made a name for yourself. And I affiliate Cardinals Twitter with you and a handful of other people, my co-hosts to my right included. And it's just kind of grown from there. And it's great. It's great to be able to see out at games, covering the team. And I mean, fast forward, it's almost going to be 16, 17 years doing this. Is it what you expected? How have things evolved, I guess, for you since you started covering the team in the capacity that you did?
Well, it's interesting because I've maintained my other job. I try not to because I get to cover the team with credentials. Like guys, like the full-time radio guys, full-time writer guy. I try to keep it Cardinals focused so that it doesn't make it feel like I'm doing this as a hobby or it's my second job, when I know most of the other guys in the building, that's their full-time gig. So I try to treat it like a full-time gig. And that's kind of what it's evolved into since I started in 2010 and I actually got thrown a few dollars just with the regional Arizona page to write injury reports and game summaries before I took over the team site. And then it was in 2012 I was able to cover the team as credentialed media. And so since that 2012 year where they went 4-0, it's evolved over time. And then they lost.
Yeah, then what happened
out of the last 12 games? That season. But I've seen a lot. It's evolved over time. I started up the podcast that I do as well back in 2013. So I'm rolling up at the end of this month. It'll be 10 years that I've done that. But I mean, for the first 4 or 5, probably nobody listened to it. I think it was just me and a handful of people, a couple of dozen that were listening to it back in the day. But yeah, it's something that it's been interesting for me having a full-time career in another field to then build up, because I started as a broadcast major in college and changed gears because of a number of things back. I graduated from college in 2001. I'm old now. I graduated from ASU with my bachelor's in 2001. And then it was 10 years later that the internet, the whole thing with internet writing kind of was taking off. And so I dabbled in that, got a couple of breaks and just stuck with it. And it's lucky enough. I'm talented enough with the language to be able to write and to know a little bit about football. Even though I never played at any level. And then to be in a market where there isn't nearly the saturation of outlets that cover it. Well, in fact, you basically have the one newspaper, the one radio station, and now you've got a couple of, and now it's like 3 or 4 online places, plus now you guys who jumped in within the last year. And so it's interesting to see. We've seen some great, we've seen some terrible, and I've been a Cardinals fan as long as I can remember following football, because I'm born and raised here. And so I really kind of started following the Cardinals in '89 on the radio on Sundays. I remember the Tim Rosenbaugh days, Tom Tupa, who is irrationally one of my favorite players of all time. I don't know why, but yeah, to go from fan to fanalist to analyst with the
Right.
honestly, there's a fan perspective that never goes away, because I want the team to do well, and that is one of the reasons why I always tend to be on the more positive side, optimistic side of things, without being I try not to be too terribly homerish.
Right. You obviously you do keep that objectivity that's important, and it's crazy to just see the evolution, and you kind of put out your own timeline when you became a credentialed media member right around the same time I did as well. It's like that 2011 kind of end of the Wiz era, and then you bring on Bruce Arians, and then a cup of coffee with Steve Wilkes, the Cliff Kingsbury era, and now here we are. I mean, how do you kind of assess that evolution, and now as they embark on a new regime, a new era, the Monti Ossenfort and Jonathan Gannon days of the Arizona Cardinals football club?
This is one of the most intriguing years, because with the general manager, with Steve Keim in place, after a few years, he kind of got a beat on the type of roster he wants to put together. And so I felt that I got a hold of trends and types of players they like, the free agents they would target, the type of draft picks that they go after high in the draft in the first round. This year, this is all new, completely. And the way they've kept things under wraps, we're beginning to see what Monti Ossenfort wants to do. In fact, he's been given the reins to be able to, completely tear down this roster and rebuild. I was recording one of my shows yesterday with my boss and the Bears Wire manager, Alyssa Barbieri, and she was describing last season of the Bears very, very similarly to what the Cardinals are going through this year. I add the caveat that I think that the Cardinals have a slightly more talented roster than the Bears did a year ago, and they have a quarterback who's farther along in his progress in the NFL. And so if we kind of look at what the Bears were last year, probably a touch better than them, depending on when Kyler's return, and based on what he's saying, he wants to come back week 1, though we know that's not happening. That's just he wants to.
Well, do we? I mean, we've spent much of our shows recently talking about Kyler Murray kind of forcing the issue, and I can understand Ossenfort and Gannon preaching patience, but I also know I get it. Week 1 is probably a stretch.
That's 8 months. We've never seen that. January surgery that's an 8-month recovery for a position for a guy so I know he's targeting week 1, and that's I love to see that mentality. So he's targeting week 1, and probably week 5, week 6 is probably because then you're hitting week 5, week 6, you're hitting just after 9 months, which is the very low end of things. Even if we look at Carson Palmer, who went through it a second time, he suffered, I believe, the injury in November and was good to go by week 1, but everyone was practicing during training camp. And so you kind of look at that 9 to 10 month area. I think it was Adrian Peterson did 9 months, and that was freaky. And so I don't want to say that Kyler's going to beat Adrian Peterson, but I'm saying he's going to try.
Yeah. We've got training camp right around the corner. I expect him to participate in some capacity. I don't think they're just going to have him stand around at some point. I think August is a realistic timetable for him to at least be padded up throwing the football, not taking part in live drills per se. But I mean, what's your opinion on Kyler Murray? Because again, you've been a fan like we have the entirety of our NFL fandoms, right? Or entirety of our lives. And I think it's easy to get lost in the mindset that Kyler Murray is the best quarterback, isn't the best quarterback they've ever drafted and developed. But frankly, it's true, with all due respect to Jake Plummer and company.
He's already one of the all-time great, numbers wise, he's already one of them
and he's in his mid-20s. So why do you think, Jess, that so many people, and everybody's entitled to their own opinion, are so easy to write him off. And the Caleb Williams conversation is a different conversation entirely. But why do you feel like it's easy for people to forget just how much this franchise has struggled to field that position at a high level?
Well, I think what it is the level of expectation. We've seen it with other sports and other players when a top pick. We'll go back to the Diamondbacks with Justin Upton. Now, he ultimately didn't live up to the bill of, generational type franchise changing players, but it always felt like fans didn't like what he was doing despite producing at a high level. And Kyler Murray, honestly, if we look at, aside from last season, in his first 3 years of the NFL, with all the lofty expectations that came into it, all the criticism about being short, the first overall pick, football or baseball, he's exceeded. He's at least met every level of expectation that any reasonable fan could have, aside from playoff wins, when he basically was the reason for most of the success they had in 2020, 2021.
Yeah, I don't think you can argue with that. I mean, them being ahead schedule in 2020 and with having that unique offseason, obviously with COVID, and you bring in DeAndre Hopkins and you don't really get to work out with the draft class. For them to come out of the gates, they beat the reigning NFC champion on the road to start that season, and their upstart. And, obviously they falter at the end of the year, and then they're able to figure out the following year and then fall off a cliff too. It was all, they went as Kyler Murray went. And when Kyler Murray was playing at a high level, the Arizona Cardinals were playing at a high level. So, what's it look like in your eyes, Jess, and Johnny, you can obviously jump in on this, but what, Drew Petzing, your new offensive play caller, how does he get Kyler Murray back, to playing at that level? And, we saw the quotes from Flight Plan, and we've heard from Kyler himself how he's going to take a look at himself in the mirror and he's going to listen to coaches and stuff like that. I mean, he's saying all the right things. We're seeing him put in all the work at the facility 5-6 days a week. Gannon saying his car's there at night when he's leaving. I mean, it seems like Kyler Murray's putting and doing everything that you would want from your franchise quarterback to rebound from his most pedestrian season of his pro career.
I think what that is I think he's hitting a maturity level. Remember when Kelvin Beach said he needed to grow up, and everyone took that really badly. It was a harsh critic, as it was harsh words. Harsh words to say something that's completely normal. He needed to grow up and do more. That didn't mean he was immature. And Kelvin even told me that it wasn't because he didn't have leadership. It's not because he was immature. He just needed to do more. And that's exactly what he's doing. He's done a little bit more every offseason. And this is the first, and I think what's making a difference for public perception of him is the fact that he's done it in the building. I have no doubt that he has, when he is in the previous off seasons, was hitting his training just as hard. He's an uber competitor, but it was at home. And so no one saw him. His teammates didn't see him, which was within his right to do the voluntary part of the off season at home training where he works with his dad. But this offseason, he's been more visible. DJ Humphries, who's already a Kyler Murray fan, has grown to love him even more because he's just saw how hard he's hitting his training in the offseason. DJ says that's how you get to know what type of football player is, how hard they push in the offseason, not during the season. And I think part of what his maturation is, he finally got his contract. Last year was crap, but it's not like he didn't put in the work. He just there was a lot of things that went wrong. And so he's always been moving forward to that. And I think he's learning that he also needs to say the right thing. People gave him a bunch of crap about saying, I don't need to grind film 24 hours a day. Mm-hmm. He's not saying he didn't do film work. He just didn't need as much of it. There's the perception of him as, and then with the last off season, I don't understand what the organization was doing in terms of what was coming out about Kyler, because everything you heard about him by coaches and players was great. You knew that he was a different kind of guy. little more reserved and things like that. But you're now getting him hitting another level of maturity when he is now learning how to basically reach different types of teammates in different ways. He, like he said in the quotes I read just today, he has like talking like harsh coaching, being coached hard. He responds to that really well. And so that's the way he responds to teammates. So he'll ride a guy's tail when they're not doing it right. And we've seen dozens of quarterbacks do that, but when Kyler does it, it's a problem. But he's learning that that's not the only way to do it. He's learning that he needs to reach out to his teammates in different ways, and he's making connections with teammates like he hasn't done in the past. And so whether it was the level of toxicity in the organization that it feels like there was last season, he feels the difference. I think Jonathan Gannon is a fantastic coach for him. I like to describe JG as Jim Harbaugh, who's not an a-hole. Jim Harbaugh made everything a competition, but very annoying and turned people off after a while. And Jonathan Gannon seems to be the right balance of everything's a competition. He's going to coach hard, but there's compassion behind it all. And I think Kyler's going to respond to that incredibly well as a guy who just loves to compete, wants to win, wants to work hard, and has honestly, in terms of mentality, I think one of the things with him is that he has a hard time when he doesn't see guys around him putting the same level of effort into winning as he does. I don't want to compare him to Kobe Bryant as a player, but I think he has kind of the same mentality.
Jess Root keeping it money here on the PHNX Cardinals podcast. Speaking of money, let me tell you about our friends at BetMGM Sportsbook. They're great lawn at State Farm Stadium. We will be there every single football Sunday this fall, live, home game, away game. It does not matter, but what does matter is getting on that BetMGM app. We use that bonus code PHNX starting Friday, June 23rd. Throughout the course of the summer, you're going to be able to get bonus bets back into your sportsbook account every single third day of the week. Again, you got to use it or you lose it. 72 hours to log in and claim that bet. But for our friends in Arizona, if you haven't signed up yet for BetMGM, use that bonus code PHNX. Now, there's a few different offers depending on where you live. But for, again, our folks in AZ, place your first bet offer and receive up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if your team loses with BetMGM. Again, make sure you're using that promo code PHNX. Check out the show notes for details. And now listen to our guy, Shane Diefenbach, talk about it in the disclaimer.
Disclaimer, 21 plus to wager. Visit BetMGM.com for terms and conditions. U.S. promotional offers not available in Washington, D.C., Mississippi, Nevada, New York, and Ontario. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Colorado, D.C., Illinois, Indiana, Louisiana, Maryland, Mississippi, New Jersey, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Virginia, West Virginia, Wyoming. Call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369, New York. Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP, Arizona. 1-800-522-4700, Kansas, Nevada. 1-800-327-5050, Massachusetts. 1-800-BETS-OFF, Iowa. 1-800-270-7117 for confidential help, Michigan. Disclaimer, 21 plus to wager. Visit.
Always like to talk about Four Peaks, continuing to spread the good word about Arizona's premier craft brewery. Of course, been around for over 25 years in the Valley of the Sun, synonymous with, of course, this great state, just like our favorite football team, baseball team, basketball team. So is Four Peaks Brewing Company. Check them out, 8th Street. Go find out what your favorite beer is that they have on tap that they brewed at that location. Kilt Lifter, of course, is the flagship. You got the #1 wheat beer in the state. That's the Wow Wheat. It's unreal. And so are all the IPA selection. The barrel age selection is unbeatable as well. So smooth. It's great post meal selection to have there. And the appetizers, the entrees, the desserts, they all go crazy. It's not just a bar menu. It's a full-on restaurant there at Four Peaks. Go find out for yourself. 8th Street in Tempe. Follow them on your socials at Four Peaks Brew and at Four Peaks Pub. They got contests, always revealing and unveiling new products, new beers at Four Peaks Brew on Instagram and at Four Peaks Pub on Twitter. You got to be 21 years or older to enjoy the beer. And of course, you should do it. And as always, responsibly. Jess Root, Johnny Venerable, Bo Brock hanging out with you, our round table. And, you know, I asked you a little bit about the new regime and Monti Ossenfort. You talked about Jonathan Gannon, but Monti, I feel like this offseason, Jess, Monty was tasked with cleaning up the mess that Steve Keim left, right? And he wasn't able to really show off his full skill set as a GM. He's been making unpopular but necessary moves for the rebuild, right? I mean, he didn't re-sign Zach Allen, didn't re-sign Byron Murphy, let those players walk potentially for comp picks down the line. And then we saw him put kind of some of his powers on display draft night, trades down from 3 with Houston, gets the haul in return, then trades back up to 6, trades down in the second round, gets a pass rusher in BJ Ujulari, a very well-regarded draft class. What have you not seen from Ossenfort so far that you want to see potentially at the beginning of the 2024 offseason?
Well, what we'll be able to see next offseason is where his priorities in terms of roster building. He comes from the Patriots, who love to build in the trenches. And if you look at what he did with the defensive front so far, when your most accomplished defensive lineman is Carlos Watkins, and he's a fine NFL player, but he's the best they got right now. I want to see more. I think he did a fine job for kind of piecing together the offensive line. Yeah. But the defensive line, we will definitely have to take a look at that next offset. That's what I want to see. We want to see a couple of big money moves next offseason when they've got the money, and kind of go from there. Hopefully they get contributions across the board from guys this year. But what we have right now, I think he and Gannon have got together, is that they're trying to put the right caliber of players, like the way they are in the locker room, and then add the talent after that. So you might see them take a greater risk over the next year or two on guys who aren't necessarily like 100% football character, loved in the locker room, but we have to build that first in the locker room so that the higher talent guys who might be slightly, he says, leave them no ego in the building. That doesn't mean they don't have egos. They just be team first. Some of those more talented players that are going to be difference makers, they are a little bit me, as long as they're with the team too. But they got to get the culture in the building first before you can do that. Say like they released DeAndre Hopkins. Say there's a DeAndre Hopkins type player next year or the next. That type of caliber player, even though there's some questions about his practice habits and things like that, you can bring him in the locker room once that culture is established.
So we talked about potential moves for next offseason. Let's look at the roster holistically right now. And you made the argument at the beginning of the show, Jess. You think it's in a little bit better spot than Chicago was last year, and I would agree with that. The Bears were a tough watch on most Sundays, and they jet-setted their best linebacker, their best pass rusher. I mean, they were not hiding it. And while the Cardinals cut DeAndre Hopkins, I still think, Kyler Murray comes back. I think the offense is very viable. I think they've got Trey McBride and Hollywood Brown. I mean, when you look at this roster, are there a couple players that you're anxious to see pop this year outside of even this rookie class? Are there some Keim holdovers that you would say at the end of the year, these are guys that should be considered building blocks for this franchise that doesn't have a ton?
Well, I think especially once you get Kyler back, whoever's at quarterback beforehand, I think the offense is going to be limited simply because Colt, there's limited things that he's going to do schematically. But when Kyler comes back, I think Hollywood's going to, if he stays healthy, he showed early last season he can be a true number one wideout, and he can be dominant. Zach Ertz is incredibly productive still. If he hadn't gotten hurt. So let's go back to 2021. He played only 11 games with the Cardinals. He tied the franchise record for tight end receptions. He will break that record if he plays a full season. Now that parts of that just tells how bad our tight end production has been historically. Sure. But you get Kyler there, that you're still going to see Hollywood perform. I really want to see what they do with James Conner, because it seems like if he's the guy and he stays healthy, he can produce. He was analytically a better running back last year than he was 2 years ago when he scored all the touchdowns. He just wasn't as great for fantasy. Rondell, Zach Pascal, I don't like. I think he's a sneaky sign because he's done some production before. He's had 2 600-yard seasons under his belt. So I think he could be sneaky okay this year. But once you get Kyler back, I think that offense is okay. I mean,
Yeah.
they will be able to score enough points to be in games, and ultimately it's going to come down to how the defense can gel, because the way the personnel looks like right now, it doesn't look good. It doesn't look good right now. But yeah, offensive side of the ball, Hollywood, Connor, Ertz, McBride, those guys more. Can he stay healthy? And maybe even Greg Dortch, but we'll see if he can do the same thing that he did in the offense last season. Defensively, everything's a big question mark. Cam Thomas. I want to see Cam Thomas take the next step. He was disruptive in his limited playing time. Can he do it on a full-time level? And then we get to see the two guys, they move positions. We thought we were going to have, honestly, we probably all thought that we were going to be looking at a 4-3 defense, and that the linebacking core was set off the ball, that you're going to have Kaiser, you're going to have Zaven, and you're going to have Isaiah Simmons. And now they moved Simmons to safety. It appears that Zaven's moved off to the edge full time. And so you've got Kaiser, and you're like, I don't know who's going to play next to him. Is it going to be Chris Barnes? Is it going to be a special teams guy like Josh Woods or Zeke Turner? Is it going to be the rookie Owen Papo? But there's so much intrigue defensively, because what I think universally expected to look at schematically still is on paper a 3-man front that'll be much more versatile, but it's looking different schematically than what we saw in Philadelphia.
Yeah, I mean, when you looked at their playoff run, they're given different looks. They were given that 3-4, 4-3, that nickel, that penny. I mean, Jonathan Gannon is kind of true to his word, to where he won't commit, to what their base is.
I heard something that I had not heard before. I was talking to the Eagles guy. I was doing that preview about the Eagles game.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently, Rollis and Gannon are both, I didn't know this, Fangio disciples? I know they came up through Mike Zimmer, but I didn't know that there was a Fangio connection.
Yeah, I mean, Fangio was there with the Eagles at the end of their playoff run.
He was a consultant. He was a
right. He was mostly consulting with their offense, as far as what the offense should expect from Spags and the KC.
But I didn't know that that there was a Fangio background to them. I thought that was more Zimmer than anything else.
Yeah, everything that we've heard and read based on their time in Minnesota, and just Petzing was on that staff. Zimmer was the one we all had kind of heard that could potentially join the staff at any point as a senior consultant, and then that kind of got debunked. But I had not heard Fangio.
Well, and then, you got Eberflus, and that Colts defensive unit that they had. There was a lot that I think Rollis and JG took away from their time in Indianapolis as well. And I think that he's just kind of a sponge, and any stop that he made, even in Louisville with Bobby Petrino, I think that there was impacts that kind of created and developed Jonathan Gannon as a head coach. But I think you're right. I mean, when you look at this offense, I think that you could predict, if things go relatively perfect, like this is a unit that could be successful at the NFL level, that could be, in the top half. I'm not saying top 10, top 5 offense, but an offense that would be a step forward over last year's group, to where defensively, if all things go right, I mean, we're talking about really getting some unique production from some unlikely sources. I mean, your pass rush is you mentioned Cameron Thomas. That's probably your most proven commodity right now as a pass rusher, because Zaven is making the position change. BJ Ujulari is the youngest player on this team at 21. And then you got, Majay Sanders, Dennis Gardeck. It really is strange. And, when you talk about that other linebacker position, it does seem like it's Josh Woods. As far as who's kind of leading all the young players out there, we talked to him, Johnny. I mean, he's a guy that looks at this as his real true opportunity to break through, just being an all-time special teamer in this league.
Yeah, he's a guy that I've heard as well. I heard the interview that you guys had. He wants to bust the door down, be a defensive player. Chris Barnes, that's the intriguing one, because he probably was one of the least mentioned signing they did He's played. He has of the linebackers that they have in the room, the off the ball linebackers, excluding Simmons and Collins, who still technically on the roster are inside backers. Barnes is the only one that has significant playing time on defense. Woods has, I think, 113 defensive snaps one year. Zeke Turner's got a handful of them. And then Papo's obviously a rookie. And then you got Kyle Soley, also a rookie. And so that room is incredibly raw. Barnes is a guy I want to watch, like Woods as well, for different reasons. Can he take the next step in his career and do what Lorenzo Alexander did, becoming basically full-time special teamer to be an impact player on defense? But Chris Barnes played significant number of snaps on defenses before with Green Bay and had 80 tackles his first 2 seasons. So that was, as a depth move, was an underrated move to begin with, but actually might end up being a significant contributor next to Kaiser White.
Yeah, I mean, isn't it great that we're talking about guys who could potentially play a role that were not first round picks? They weren't used with premium picks. It's like, hey, yeah, off ball linebackers, if you hit on one, great, but yeah, they should probably be taken, mid to late in the NFL draft or, minimal free agent signings. I want to talk to Jess about what he thinks of the Cardinals draft class from this past April. But first, I want to tell you guys about Pins and Aces. It's the official golf apparel of our partner here, PHNX and ALLCITY. Check out Big Drive Energy wherever you get your podcast. Love my gear from Pins and Aces. You can too. Again, polos, hats, golf bags, even their famous beer sleeve, an innovative product that allows you to store 7 beers right inside your golf bag. Keep the drinks cold the entire round. Their website is consistently popping off. Stuff's going in and out of stock quick, so be sure to check out pinsandaces.com. Use that promo code PHNX. We're going to get you 15% off your first order plus free shipping. That's pinsandaces.com.
Also, OG's Brands, don't forget about them. They released their new pink lemonade flavored gummy. You don't want to miss out on this. Of course, you think about summer and you think about ice cold pink lemonade. Of course, it's right there. It's got that flavor that will bring back all the nostalgia. Check out everything that they've got, ogsbrands.com. All their products are right there on their website, ogsbrands.com. Figure out if you're a fruits or creams guy or gal. Also, check out their Sleep Edition gummies. Will help put you to sleep and keep you asleep. Don't want to miss out on that. There's an aquaberry Sleep Edition flavored gummy from OG's. Flavoring life. That's what it's all about. Just like PHNX Sports, that's what OG's Brands, that's their mission statement. Check them out on Instagram as well, at OG's Brands. You can find all their products. Your local dispensary, got to be 21 years or older to purchase.
I was thinking about it, Jess. I rarely get what I want from this team in the first couple rounds of the NFL draft, right? Like, I think dating back to maybe like 2011, 2012, like I loved Michael Floyd. I thought that was fantastic. And I loved Josh Rosen. But outside of that, I did not love Isaiah Simmons, as our viewers know. Zaven Collins was fine. They've been all over the place in the first round. This was the first time in a long time, and Bo can attest to this, that I was beating the drum for Paris Johnson Jr. because I just thought it was safe. I think he's a tremendous, tremendous talent with plenty of upside. We talked to his position coach from Ohio State. Like, I think he's just got a really high floor. And for a team that does not hit on enough first-round picks, it's just like, can we just get a guy who gets a second contract? Can we get a guy? I know that's DJ Humphries, but you got such few quality reps during like his first couple of years in the NFL that you were kind of hoping and guessing with that next contract. And thankfully it's panned out. Like, what'd you make of Paris Johnson Jr. and the rest of this draft class for the Redbirds?
There were a number of players at the top of the draft I really liked, and when you had the third pick, it made it really easy to like a lot of players.
Yeah.
But the fact that they were able to land future picks and land Paris Johnson, who, in fact, that we later heard was the guy Kyler wanted. Funny story, like if you recall, Steve Keim always loved to comment how Kyler would send him texts, hey, this guy, hey, this guy, hey, this guy. They never listened to him. But you see the players that Kyler wanted them to draft all excelling in the NFL, and you're like, oh, maybe he's got something there. Now, Ossenfort played it coy on draft night, because he said, oh, Kyler liked that guy? I thought, they met each other or something, but come on, Monty, come on. He was regularly texting Steve Keim guys that he wanted. He was in the building when Paris was there. Clearly you knew that Kyler wanted Paris. And I think this was one of the things that turned. So I loved that pick. Ojulari on the night of the draft wasn't my favorite pick, but I get why they did it. There were a couple other players, even pass rushers, that I preferred, but then you look at the fact that he's so young, and the other guys that were looking were COVID babies in the draft, so they had an extra year, so they were older. I get why they did it. He was super productive, and has the youth, so he's got room to grow, and super athletic. There were two picks that I didn't love. Like Garrett Williams, I get why they did it, but could you have gotten someone who's going to probably contribute this year? Michael Wilson is an intriguing selection, but in terms of where he was drafted, it's a perfect match. Clayton Tune, I didn't love the pick, but I like the prospect. But pretty much across the board, going into that draft, they kind of hit every area that they could have, except for the center position. We all expected a center. We were all, I think everyone following the Cardinals was watching Luke Whippler, and then he falls to late day 3. So clearly the Cardinals didn't really like him. And John Gaines might be the center of their future, but he's only got 2 games under his belt for it. But in the moment, I liked most of the picks. Look, afterward, you're like, those are really, like, for the risk that you take at different spots. Yeah. With the moves that they made itself, it was just a fantastic draft because they filled needs, they got talent for now and for later, and they added capital for next year when they figure. And I think the plan is this: if they show enough promise with Kyler upon his return, they feel that they can be big players next year and legitimately compete in 2024.
Yeah, I thought that Monti Ossenfort kind of had not necessarily the Midas touch. I mean, that remains to be seen, but obviously going premium positions with his first 3 picks, tackle, edge, corner, kind of a newcomer to the premium positions, wide receiver over the last 2 seasons, right? It seems like teams are really emphasizing that and paying top dollar for wide receivers. And then you look at it, I mean, like Gaines, I'm with you. I'm not about to anoint him their starting center. He's too far removed from the last time he played the position. He's obviously the most athletic offensive lineman from the class. He's got the smarts. He was quoting poetry in one of his press conferences. A lot to like, right? But a long way to go. And then the lottery ticket type guys that, I don't think Steve Keim really knew how to try to hit on those late round picks and to go with a Keitrell Clark who's undersized, but I think, he's a guy that plays with his hair on fire, and Stills, who was a TFL machine in the Big 12. It's just like, if those guys can find some spot, some niche on this roster, I think that's a win for Ossenfort at the back end of the draft, where you didn't find that, under the previous general manager. But when we talk about Paris Johnson, though, I mean, a ton to like, Jess. I mean, obviously the on the field, the off the field, the between the ears, a guy that speaks several languages, including Mandarin. He's philanthropic, and then he's just a beast. You see all the highlights. You look at a publication, you look at 3 different publications, and you'll find 3 different positions for Paris Johnson Jr. I saw him primarily at the right tackle spot. What do you think the best part to deploy your first round pick is to start his career?
I think they signed him. I think they drafted him to play tackle, and he's gotten the work at tackle. When people were plugging him at left guard, sure, he could play left guard because he's played the left side of the line playing left tackle. He played right guard, so he can play both guard and tackle. He can play both sides of the line at a high level. But his length and athleticism, you want at tackle, and I think they selected him with the idea that he's going to be their starting right tackle this year, making Josh Jones' spot on the roster and Kelvin Beacham's spot on the roster both kind of a competition for each other. And Beacham was re-signed with the idea that he wants to compete and he wants a little bit, and he got that. He got his full salary this year is guaranteed, but he might be playing a different role this year coming off the bench, because I think Paris Johnson is going to be their right tackle this season, and then potentially moving forward, moving to left tackle once they're ready to move on from DJ Humphries.
Yeah. And I think, signing Beacham at the time, while it was confusing to a lot of people, it's just like, Well, they didn't know they were going to be able to get
Right.
Paris Johnson Jr. definitively. What if they would have gotten like a second or third tier tackle prospect that you just, I mean, Paris is a plug and play player. And I've been adamant, Jess, since day one, like you have to play him in his natural position. I know he can play guard, but I mean, for a season that a lot of people, not myself, but a lot of people think is a throwaway season, like what are you doing not playing him at tackle in favor of, and I love Kelvin Beachum. He's in his mid-30s, right? He's not going to be part of your future. And I frankly would love to see Josh Jones get play at tackle. Should he get an opportunity? We know DJ Humphries has been injury prone. Now he's in what equates to a contract year with all of his guaranteed money moved to this year. Let me ask you this. You had kind of floated the idea of potentially moving off of either Beachum or Jones. Do you think they could get something of worth for Josh Jones as we head into the preseason? Or, and this is kind of where I'm at, the Cardinals have never had the luxury of 4 capable tackles. Do they just hang on to it?
Depends on how they play the roster, because also I think one of them you could trade. I think potentially Beachum is solid enough that you could trade him. You won't get much for Beachum, but I think you can get a little bit for Jones. Although, why wouldn't you keep him around?
Right.
Especially this year being a year where they have almost all young players. He's young. He does his salary bump this year does make it interesting in terms of roster building, because they signed some others that the guaranteed money comes into play, not just the signing bonus, but the salary. Beachum's entire salary is guaranteed. Elijah Wilkinson, whom they signed, a player who I actually think will be their starting left guard, $940,000 of his salary is guaranteed. Dennis Daly, 2-year deal, $400,000 of his salary is fully guaranteed. And I think, and while I wasn't at practice, so I didn't see it, but I heard, because we know we're not supposed to talk about these things, I heard that Daly and Wilkinson were the ones getting the reps, the first team reps at left guard, Wilkinson towards the end. And so I'd be looking at those veteran positions there. Beachum and Jones, because of their tackle positions, they're going to have some value on the market. Can you keep 4 tackles when you have guys, because you need a center guard backup, you need a tackle guard combo, and you need a swing tackle. So when you're building your roster, you've got your 5 starters, you need a backup center, an interior guy, and like a swing tackle, and a guy that can play tackle guard. So if you're keeping 8-9 guys, Beachum could be your swing guy. You could keep Jones as your tackle guard combo, but that complicates things because both Wilkinson and Daly are that as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Dennis Daly is like that could be trouble for this fan base if he sees meaningful snaps.
I saw he was trending on Twitter one day, and the nightmare after I clicked on it.
Left tackle, okay? Gannon said this is a low key thing when they signed him, and it was just an offhanded comment. Gannon, someone said about Dennis Daly, because he played left tackle this year, and Gannon just off the cuff he said, "I hear he plays guard much better." Yeah, and that was kind of a comment that no one caught. Yeah. It was like, oh, their plan for him is at guard, maybe.
Yeah.
But the 2-year deal tells you he was an Ossenfort guy. He's a good depth guy. Will he start a left guard? I don't know. Hopefully, I mean, left tackle was not good last year, but he's really not a left tackle. That would be like asking Will Hernandez. No, only Will Hernandez is a much better caliber lineman, period. But asking Will Hernandez to play left tackle for an entire year when DJ Humphries goes down is like when Taylor Lewan went down last year.
Yeah, you can't fill every need in one offseason, right? And the Cardinals, they didn't address center, they didn't address guard with all due respect to John Gaines, who is a day 3 pick. But you can fill every need in your display shelf with our friends at FOCO. They got the best officially licensed gear for all sports and fandoms. FOCO is the leading manufacturer of sports and entertainment merchandise with great product lines that include apparel, accessories, toys, collectibles, novelty items, and more. Of course, baseball season is in full swing. Aloha shirts, straw hats, polos, bags, whatever you need as we hit the home stretch here in August and September. Set decor. FOCO's got a ton of stuff on display on their website, which is fantastic. Check them out. They're big advocates and supporters of Arizona sports. Best gear around is at FOCO.com. That's www.FOCO.com. Use that bonus code PHNX, and for all non-presale items, you're going to get 10% off, Bo.
Yep. And you can get some perks as well by becoming a diehard right now to PHNX. Of course, go to gophnx.com or the PHNXlocker.com, and you can set yourself up for some incredible perks like free gear from the locker, or maybe some money off your next route at Dobson Ranch Golf Course, or your next stop at Illegal Pete's. Of course, exclusive access to our member Discord where we're talking Cards football 24/7. Don't miss out on that. Become a diehard today. We're going to have a lot of great things, including, the full takeover with the Diamondbacks. Yep. You can get early access to that, and maybe some things along with our tailgates in our post games over at the BetMGM Sportsbook. But of course, don't delay. Become a diehard today. Go PHNX.com. So as we record this podcast, this roundtable with Jess Root, Jess, the Cardinals, once they get Vijay Ojulari in the fold, they figure out the guaranteed dollars on his contract, they'll still have a few roster spots remaining to get to 90 before we get out of here. Who do you feel, or which positions do you think that this team would address once they start to take the field officially in training camp?
I'm not convinced that they're set at running back or at center. And at least we have evidence that they might not be at center when they brought in Chase Roulier for a visit before a mini camp. Now, Roulier ultimately retired. He announced his retirement this last week. But the fact that they brought in a veteran center tells me that they still have an eye on that position, that Yelda Froholt's probably not going to be their starter. The list of centers out there is unimpressive overall. They're old and hurt, almost all of them. But the guy I've said for months to keep an eye out for is Ben Jones, the Titans starter from both Texans and Titans. The connections that Ossenfort has previously, and with the Casario and everything there. I keep my eye on him. I know you guys have mentioned it as well, but at running back, I'm not convinced that if they're going to be focusing on running the ball, that they are going to bet on Keontae Ingram based on what they saw last year. They didn't draft him. The GM didn't draft him. So those guys have something to prove. Corey Clement, he kind of built there. He's had a few rushing yards here and there, but he's been mostly a special teams guy. With the 3 roster spots that they still got, I would expect a center and a running back at least. And if they're going to be targeting veteran players, I'm sure you guys have mentioned it, but Kareem Hunt is a guy that makes sense at running back, Ben Jones at center, because I'm just not convinced that they're going to roll into season when they're trying to build their offensive line to protect their quarterback. Kyler Murray coming back to have a guy that's got 4 NFL starts. And Froholt is literally the only guy on their roster that's played any games in the NFL at center, and it's 4 games.
We'll get you out of here on this, Jess. So gracious with your time. Cardinals over under with our friends at BetMGM in Vegas, 4.5. What's the win total looking like for the Redbirds? Knowing that Kyler Murray had a schedule with his torn ACL, could get, at least 3/4 of the season with your franchise quarterback. Where do you think they end up in the standings at the end of the year? What's the record?
I take a lot of flack for it, but when I did my game-by-game predictions, I based it on a Kyler Murray returning in week 6. I thought they'd finish. I think they would start 2-7, and then kind of pick up the pace later in the year. I have them winning 7 games as optimistic total.
Nice.
I think, but in terms of projected, I'm super confident in over 4.5. If you want to go a little bit extra confident, I know that the win total, the line for 5.5, over 5.5 is really, really lucrative.
Nice. Tease it up, baby.
Over 4.5 is good enough. I think plus 120. That's a good bet to me. That's a really good bet. Plus 5.5, over 5.5, it gets even better. And that's a little more risky, but I think there's at least 5 wins in this team. 5 to 7 I think is reasonable. 5 to 7 is a reasonable, 7 is like everything going well. I don't think they're going to get much better than that, but I think I'm projecting Kyler coming back about week 6 and that he's going to play well. And so by the end of the year, that defense will, and at least with the players that they have the roster, they're going to be a competitive roster. They probably will lose competitively many, many times, but start to pick up a few wins because they do have winnable games on their schedule. They play the Texans, they play the Falcons, They play the Bears. And those 3 games are very
The
winnable
Rams
games.
twice.
The
Yeah.
Rams twice. The Rams, we don't like the Rams are a big mystery. And I think they sneak in a win. Like I think their sneak win early in the season is going to be the Giants. They're going to win their home opener against the Giants with Colt McCoy. Because I don't believe the Giants are that good. But I think that's going to be the only win they get till Kyler comes back. So yeah, I like the over 4.5, and I even sneaky like over 5.5. So 6-7 wins, even though my personal prediction was 7 and 10 overall.
Jess Root, yeah, check him out. Cards Wire, managing editor, Rise Up Red Sea podcast. Been a pleasure to have you on, Jess, as we continue the offseason coverage. Training camp just around the corner. Follow him at Jess Root. He's at Bo Brock. I'm at Johnny Venerable. We'll catch you next week.